around life in Lucy Van Pelt on March of 1952. Originally, she was based on Meredith, being a more precocious toddler before evolving to the loud, aggressive girl that threw all the other characters off balance. Her name was a direct reference to their friends, Philip and Luann Van Pelt. The Schultzes mostly stayed at home when they moved to Colorado Springs and didn't make friends until 4 months afterwards, which were the Van Pelts. Fritz was a local school teacher at the Whitner Elementary School, and Luann was job hunting with the local employment agency sharing the second floor with Charles Schulz's studio. The couple soon became regular visitors at Schultz's house, sometimes 4 nights a week, often playing bridge with Beethoven playing in the background. Shortly after, Charles Schulz would introduce Linus Van Pelt, Lucy's baby brother, in the strip in September 1952, and he would remain a toddler in the strip until 1955. His first name came from Linus Mara, a friend and classmate at Minneapolis School of Art, and a cartoonist himself. Linus would later evolve into an intellectual of the strip and great with his hands. Schulz would state he was his favorite character to draw, especially his blanket. This would follow a theme with many of the Peanuts characters, as many of them would have a prop to Schroeder and his piano. As Linus's blanket, Fritz would claim to have inspired the idea relating to a story of Meredith being clinging with a toy rabbit, and Charles insisting that she put it down, to a point where he hid it from her. Fritz argued that sometimes children need physical objects for comfort, which Charles agreed to and later translated into the strip with Linus's blanket. Little did he know that it would become so iconic that the phrase security blanket would become made into the Webster's Dictionary years later. Despite this incident, Schulz rarely let friends give him ideas for his strip, despite being family or whoever else, at least not directly. As has been shown and we'll see, Schulz got names, characters, and ideas from observing those around him, but never when an idea was directly presented. Ultimately, all of the ideas for Peanuts came from him and his experiences, though he did use one idea from a reader in Florida that led to a strip in which Charlie Brown tries to teach his younger sister Lucy, who first appeared in March of 1952, the count by asking her how many sailboats she sees in the picture, with her reply being all of them, to his frustration. Others came from watching, such as when Joyce joked that birthdays should be retroactive and one should get gifts for all the ones you missed before you met them, which would soon be proclaimed by Lucy, who was evolving into a translation of Joyce. A joke about snow coming up from the ground came from Meredith, who thought that was so. In addition, Monty's obsession with the Red Baron, the legendary World War I fighter pilot, would also play a large part later in the strip as well. When readers did send on him ideas, Charles would joke that they should send him to Walt Kelly for Pogo instead. As shown, he had plenty of sources already. As for Charles Schulz's friend, Charles Brown, whom he took the name from, he saw a lot of himself in the comic strip character and even appeared on a game show, To Tell the Truth, where the contestants challenged to discover who the really Charlie Brown was. They failed, and in classic Charlie Brown fashion, despite winning, he would state, "But no one picked me." He would later write Me, Charlie Brown, a book of good grief, though Schulz would later deny he took inspiration for his character from him, just the name, stating that the real Charles Brown was too good of a friend to be depicted in such a way. Considering Brown would attempt suicide at one point, it's understandable why Schulz would deny this. Like many creators, he would always state his characters and the strip itself was all he was. The Schulz life in Colorado Springs was short-lived, as they would move back to Minnesota in summer of 1952, with Joyce later claiming so he could be nearer to his dad. As a sign of his growing success, the Schultzes bought a 2-story colonial house in Wentworth Avenue South, complete with a front and backyard, bungalow, and 2-car garage. For a couple who grew up as children eating pancakes for dinner because it was cheap, this was almost unimaginable. Back home, the Art Instruction Incorporated took advantage of their new star graduate when the Buckbees, the conservative Baptist family who co-owned and administered the company, made Schulz a member of the advisory board and assigned him a special studio at the top of the Bureau of Engraving, which his friends called the Penthouse. They even went so far as to groom Schulz to become a full member of the company, but he declined, choosing to focus just on his strip. While there, Schulz started devising other strips outside of Peanuts, such as an action strip and one about bridge, the game he picked up with the Van Pelts. He would do 14 trial episodes of his adventure strip, Joe Cypher, with Jim Sassville, who just come back from a 19-month-long tour with the U.S. Navy. However, this is quickly shut down when, back at the Syndicate, Harry Gilbert said not to do anything that would cut into his work on Peanuts, which was starting to pick up, as by September 1954, Schulz made $2,500 a month at a time when the average salary was $4,000 a year. By 1956, he was making that annual salary of $4,000 a month, along with being double what his father Carl had originally predicted his son would make. Schulz did do some outside work, illustrating 2 volumes of Art Linklater's Kids Say the Darndest Things in 1957 and 1961, along with Dear President Johnson by Bill Adler, a collection of letters in 1964. For the most part, though, Peanuts would be Charles Schulz's life's work. His notoriety began to soar, too, with a feature of Charles Schulz published in the Saturday Evening Post, featuring a picture of him sitting in his father's chair at the family barbershop. Of course, such success would bring others trying to cash in, including rival syndicates to United, who wanted to steal away their rising cartoonists. Notably, Sylvan Bike of King Feature Syndicate, who, like many others, originally rejected Schulz, tried to shine him to his own contract, with the potential of him owning the copyright to Peanuts. But Schulz chose to stay with United, finding the arrangement amicable. United, on its part, continued to push Peanuts further, having it translated into Spanish, renaming it Carlitos for the Spanish-language papers. Plus, U.S. college papers started to request Peanuts to run in their comics pages in 1953, replacing Lil Abner in Cornell's Daily Sun that May. By 1958, the editor of Yale's Record designated Charles Schulz the humorist of the year, and his strip even started to appear in textbooks. It was the February 1st, 1954 strip of Charlie Brown's being envious of his friend's more elaborate train tracks set that had made Peanuts a national icon, as Schulz became the speaker of a generation that absorbed in irony and tension. One honor that did elude Schulz early on, though, was membership in the National Cartoonist Society, as he was denied membership in 1956, despite Otto Sluggo's endorsement. He would have finally been admitted in 1959. Schulz believed himself a serious humorist, though mild in demeanor and compared to his fellow cartoonists. Of course, his teetotaler nature was noted, as Mort Walker, the creator of Beetle Bailey, noticed that though Walker would sponsor Schulz to become a member of the National Cartoon Society as well. Plus, a constant theme throughout every Peanut strip was that it never ended happily. While he wouldn't become a member of the National Cartoon Society in 1959, he thought he would at least win its most prestigious award in 1954. The Reuben, named the design by the legendary cartoonist Rube Goldberg, but lost to sports cartoonist Willard Mullen. Quite frankly, most of his colleagues in the comic strip industry were confused by Peanuts and its creator, as Schulz not only didn't drink, but he abstained from smoking and cursing as well. However, his quiet demeanor hid a fierce competitive nature that would rear his head from time to time, such as when his friend Charles F. Brown stated he was quitting cartooning, which Schulz replied, half-jokingly, "Good, one less person to compete with." No one could deny Schulz pushed himself harder than any other cartoonist in the business, and he wanted to be recognized for it. It wasn't just art that Schulz wanted to excel at as well, but also business. It was very industrious in how further to apply Peanuts. The strip kept growing, appearing in the LA Times on March 13, 1955, then the Reidsville Review on April 4th, the New Orleans State's Item on April 10th, along with the Dallas Morning News and the Fort Worth Press on June 12th. By mid-1955, Peanuts was in 100 papers, then it started to jump to 125 by May, and then 250 by October. By 1957, Peanuts was in 230 daily papers and 102 Sunday papers, along with 16 college papers. By 1958, that number would be 400. Schulz kept improving the pacing and design of Peanuts with more elaborate titles, particularly in the Sunday strips, which started to contain hidden gags. Despite this success, Schulz remained engaged with his fans and was noted for being willing to give away original art at a request, long before anyone knew just how valuable such art would be. Schulz did have fun with his readers, though, occasionally joking about killing off a favorite character at different times. One fan of note was J. Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI, who Schulz sent the August 2nd, 1954 strip, which featured a gag about fingerprints. With the strip itself becoming successful, licensing and advertising were soon to follow, such as Eagle Pencils, which Schulz didn't use, and Eastman Kodak's Brownie Book of Picture Taking. While agreeing on a licensing fee, Schulz and United Features jokingly used the flinch system to set the price, meaning they would set a figure for licensing, and if they flinched, they knew they had the right number. Schulz also would be generous with royalties from licensing, though, believing in splitting it equally, insisting he got a third, United Features got a third, and the licensor a third. If another part was involved, Schulz would call for a four-way split of 25% apiece. This wasn't just Schulz being generous, but also smart, as he understood early on that if a licensor had equal skin in the game, they would work just as hard to make sure that Peanuts product was a success. One of the most unbelievable aspects of Charles Schulz's career was his claim he trained through the mail, which he did through the Federal Schools Incorporated, and would continue to help the Art Institute with entries, with his name appearing on above the letterhead. By March 1st, 1955, United announced it intended to extend Schulz's contract for another 5 years. With professional life secure, he bought a new house for $32,000, which was twice as much as the average home at the time, a 3-story home in the Minnekelly Creek. He continued to be a dedicated Church of God and dutifully tithed 10% of his income. Back home, Schulz continued to be a tradition with his kids painting murals on their walls, this time for Monty. They would soon be joined by Craig Frederick, who was born on January 22nd, 1953. It was long before Joyce was expecting their 4th child. By August 5th, 1956, Amy Louise was born, and the local paper proclaimed a new Peanuts character was born. On August 26, 1956, the National Cartoonist Society voted Schulz Outstanding Cartoonist of the Year and finally received a Reuben from Rube Goldberg himself at the Hotel Astor in New York City. He would later state it was the happiest and loneliest day of his life. By 1957, he was earning $90,000 a year, twice as much as the highest paid college president at the time at $800,000 in today's dollars. However, he started to avoid public appearances as he considered his looks homely and fans would be disappointed by him. The Peanuts empire continued to expand, though, when he was contracted by Ford to produce the print advertisements for How I Sold a Million Falcons in My Spare Time. It was a particular honor to Schulz, as Ford was considered a man's car at the time, so to be made the pitchman felt like a true achievement for the former meek Midwestern boy. While Schulz tried to avoid the spotlight, it still found him, as when the Saturday Evening Post in January 1957 ran the feature The Success of Utter Failure about his life. Soon it was followed by articles in Look, Life, and Time magazine. It was a theme that Schulz would carry throughout his entire life, and stating on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson that failure was everything, even joking that Charlie Brown now got more fan mail than he did. He did sell the image that Charlie Brown was his soulmate, though he would later admit it was just good story in the New York Times in 1969. When Schulz did make appearances, he always would draw Snoopy on a chalkboard before his audience and then proclaim, "Just to prove I'm not a fake." These appearances would soon be called Chalk Talks, where he would preach the faith while also talking about his peanuts. With the Church of God, he started a scholarship fund in Anderson, Indiana. Youth Pillars also dedicated profits to the church, along with a collection of the youth cartoons, which provided royalties to the church as well. Schulz also served as a Sunday school teacher, treasurer, member of the Board of Education, deacon, and trustees, along with being a lay preacher. Soon he helped fund the new Church of God building in Minneapolis at the East 38th Street and 38th Avenue South, where he served as assistant pastor in 1958. For Schulz, he saw no problem being a cartoonist and a Christian at once, and even met Billy Graham in August 1957. One myth about Charles Schulz is that he loved kids, being the creator of a children's strip in Peanuts. However, Charles Schulz would always insist that Peanuts was an adult strip just starring kids, and while he did love his own children, wasn't particularly interested in children in general. As a result, he often refused to ever license Peanuts for children's products. To him, Peanuts was a second family, and they were meant for adults. The success of Peanuts did have a negative aspect of Schulz as well, as he started to suffer from panic attacks and back out of public events, to the point that Joyce would drop him off at the airport, only to find him back home before she even got back. That didn't stop his success, as on April 1965 he became the first cartoonist to win the Reuben twice, but didn't go with Harry Gilbert accepting it instead. Schulz wasn't even safe at the home, as reporters would show up at his house and even Joyce would be interviewed, admitting that she called herself Lucy on April 1962, but hated it. However, Schulz started to model Lucy more and more after Joyce, along with a bit of her mother, too. Lucy's favorite phrase, "snap out of it," came from his mother-in-law. Perhaps the biggest compliment, though, came from Pogo cartoonist Walt Kelly, who proclaimed Charlie Brown and Lucy Van Pelt to be the perfect American couple, an ineffectual male and a domineering female. That's not to say that Joyce didn't enjoy being Mrs. Charles Schulz, and especially his money, which she used to buy furniture and the latest modern appliances for the house, along with managing the finances in general. However, when Joyce would complain to him about not being involved in the family or her more, he would start drawing, similar to how Schroeder would ignore Lucy by playing his piano. Joyce did set out to better herself, buying a Baldwin baby grand piano and enrolled in classes at McPhail School of Music in Minneapolis, majoring in piano while minoring in violin. All of this was encouraged by Schulz. And with that, we will conclude for now on the life of Charles Schulz. But join me again next week. We continue on his miraculous rise to success. While Charles Schulz also tries to make a stab at some other strips, but not to quite